Welcome back to the Metaphoric Music Review. Another crazy stacked week. Pitchfork, please chill out a little bit. You're killing us here. But as always, I'm Gabe.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Darin.
Talking about the music that Pitchfork thinks everyone should be talking about. If you don't know, Pitchfork is an online music magazine. It's basically the loudest voice in music today. Each week they review a bunch of albums. Most get pretty mediocre scores, but a couple get this coveted BNM or BNR label. Dan, what is that?
BNM, Best New Music, BNR, Best New Reissue.
Right. So those are the releases that Pitchfork thinks all lovers of music should be talking about, and that is exactly what we're going to do. But we're also going to talk about a few notable pans, some gems that Pitchfork is either underrated or ignored completely, Pitchfork's weekly Sunday Classic review, and now Pitchfork's BNTs, or Best New Tracks. It's important to remember, though, you don't need to know or care about Pitchfork at all to enjoy this podcast. We are about to tell you everything you need to know about the week in music. So, Darin, what are we talking about this week?
For the week of March 6th through March 12th, we'll be discussing Elliott Smith's Either Or Expanded Edition, which received a BNR, Jay Sum's Everybody Works, which was an excellent BNM, and for the Sunday Classic, we had Thelonious Monk's Music. Plus, this week marked the 20th anniversary of the death of Christopher Wallace, a.k.a. the Notorious B.I.G., and Pitchfork paid tribute by reviewing nearly his entire discography. We actually talked about his classic debut, Ready to Die, on a previous episode about best rap albums for beginners. So if you're interested in hearing our thoughts about that, check out the archive at metaphoricmusic.com. So instead of that one, we'll be discussing Biggie's equally classic posthumous follow-up, Life After Death.
Yeah. In fact, we also got another BNR that we're just going to skip. It's Fleetwood Mac's Tango in the Night. I don't know. We adequately handled 80s Fleetwood Mac on a previous episode, and the reissue doesn't even come out for like another several weeks anyway. So, whatever. We're also going to skip the various artists compilation we pushed back last week. Sorry, I feel bad about this. Outro Tempo, Electronic and Contemporary Music from Brazil, 1978 to 1992. They got a BNR, and it was pretty cool. Did either of you guys check it out?
No, I haven't had time yet, but I'm really interested in it.
Yeah, I haven't either.
There's just cool, like kind of, I don't know, some sort of like early experiments in electronic mixed with sort of like a Brazilian type of songwriting. It's, longer than it needs to be, but it's pretty cool. So check it out, but we're not going to do a full review. Also, a little bit later, Dan's going to tell us about seeing Ghostface Killah in concert. But first, this week we got 4 BNTs, or Best New Tracks, like I said earlier, which Pitchfork typically uses to highlight promising singles. What we like to do with these is listen to them right now, right at the top of the show, and share some quick reactions in real time, just to decide whether these upcoming albums from which, these singles are taken could be worthy of that coveted BNM. Unfortunately, we're going to have to skip most of these BNTs for the sake of time on this, again, very packed week, including Hooray for the Riff Raff's Palante, because the record actually got reviewed today and didn't get a BNM, so what are we looking forward to, really? Sacred Pause Every Day, which comes from a record that's been out since January, and Jay Sum's Baby, since we'll actually be talking about that full record a little later in the show. But Darin, the one BNM we're going to look at in depth, or BNT, sorry, we're going to look at in depth, which is it?
So our BNT was Fleet Fox's 3rd of May, or Odaigahara. I probably said that wrong, but let's take a listen.
Second son on the other line. Now back in our town is a castaway. I'm reminded at the time it all fell in line on the 3rd of May. As if it were designed.
Back in 2011, when they released the critically acclaimed Helplessness Blues, Fleet Foxes were on top of the indie world, but aside from a solo project here and there, the band has been completely silent ever since. Their brand of indie folk pop was very much in vogue in 2011, but they'll try to find their place in a very different musical landscape on their upcoming LP, Crack Up, which drops June 16th. So what'd you think of the 9-minute song?
I thought it was about 8 minutes and 52 seconds too long.
I was thinking, like, what if I fell asleep and just recorded myself like all night? Yeah, God, it started off like pleasantly surprising. It was like quite peppy right off the start. I expected like a real slow like build up with this like long song, but it kicked right off, and I found it like a lot catchier than I expected. I sort of hate Fleet Foxes, but I haven't listened to them much. I just hate the idea of them because to me they're like the epitome of that like really bland, like folksy, just Starbucks trash kind of music. But it was pleasant until about halfway through. I guess the hell is this track called? Like the Oga Dooba Dooba part was really, really bad.
Yeah, it's God. Like at first, it wasn't too awful. It sounded a lot like Amen Dunes. I don't know if you ever listened to them, but it sounded like that, but like not as good. And then just turned into like fucking around. I got so bored. Like I honestly I didn't pay a lot of attention to the end.
He started drumming. Dan started drumming. I could hear him.
So bored.
So. I'm not a big Fleet Foxes fan or anything. I kind of agree with what you were saying there, Gabe. But I, too, was like pleasantly surprised. I thought it was about 3 minutes and 30 seconds or so when I noticed things shifted. And I was like, the whole time I was kind of wondering, like, this feels like a fine, decent 3.5 minute pop song. What are they going to do to this to make it last for 9 minutes? And they just sort of like tore it apart and just kind of noodled, which is kind of what I thought was going to happen in the beginning. It was like sort of reversed in a way.
Right. Yeah.
But the first 3 minutes and 30 seconds, I thought was fine. I mean, that could have lived as its own song, I guess. But the rest I kind of just lost interest. Just hard to pay attention. Don't really know where they were going, and then suddenly the song just kind of ended.
Yeah. Maybe it'll make more sense in the context of the LP, but I highly doubt it, and I hope I don't have to find out. It's just like the first 3.5 minutes was like a good. All right, I'm using the term "good" here loosely, but decent, shitty Starbucks folk song. But then it's like deconstructing that could be cool. There's cool ways to do that and make it last 9 minutes. But they didn't do that. They just like fucking noodled under the like guise of deconstruction, and it just was incredibly boring.
Yeah, it's weird because I was at this bar last night and there were some Deadheads in there, and they were spinning some Grateful Dead records. And when this song started, I was like, this sounds like it sounds like a Grateful Dead song, kind of, and I was like, maybe that's
I don't know
what's
about
gonna.
that.
It just had that like sort of San Francisco kind of like 60s pop kind of vibe to it, and like the part of Grateful Dead songs that nobody cares about.
Okay,
and then I was like, maybe that's what it's gonna do. It's gonna go into like just some nice like groove, like gonna hear some nice licks for the next next 6 minutes or whatever. And it was like the opposite of a Grateful Dead song, where instead of building up, it just like collapses and then it's like tinkering and noodling. So yeah, do you guys think this has a chance of getting a BNM? Music like 2011 really, that folk thing was real big. Like Grizzly Bear, Bon Iver, Fleet Foxes were definitely like one of the big ones there. Does this have a chance based on what you've heard of like adding anything new to the conversation?
From my opinion, no. From Pitchfork's opinion, stranger things have happened. Bon Iver's last record got that BNM and pretty good score and everything. So it wouldn't shock me, but this is a dated item. Belongs in 2011 and no place in 2017 for me.
I didn't think it sounded too much like 2011. It's still Fleet Foxes. It's still easy to recognize, but I will give them credit for doing something that I sort of didn't really expect. If the rest of the album is kind of like surprising and maybe shifting away from that kind of 2011 sound, then maybe I'll give it a chance. But if the last half of the song is any indication of what's to come, I don't think that it's going to be that impressive.
Yeah, I think I feel exactly the same. So we ready to hear about Dan's concert?
Yeah.
Making moves back and forth uptown. $60 per song is the cab fee. Wintertime bubble goose, clouds of smoke. Music blasting in the A-Rag V blunted. Whip smelling like fish for 125. Throwing ketchup on my fries. guys hitting baseball splits.
Okay, yeah. I unlike you guys, went to another concert. This is probably, my what episode are we on? 48. I think I've been to about 46, where you guys have been to 2 or 3. But regardless, I saw the Ghostface Killah, Tony Starks, at the Tampa has this big music festival every year. It's called the Gasparilla Music Festival. Gasparilla has some shit to do with a pirate. I don't know. Tampa loves pirates. I've lived here my whole life. I don't know shit about it. But regardless, Ghostface was the only good person playing. So I went to this festival, saw him. It was cool, except festivals suck. Everybody that was, they have like a little pit area that's like VIP only. You have to buy like $150 tickets. So the people that were in there, nobody cared. Everyone was just like, oh, I've heard of this guy, pop in. Like, it was like half empty and people were popping in, popping out. So the like crowd level was like super low energy. Ghostface kept yelling at the crowd, basically saying Tampa sucks. Which we don't normally. It's just, festivals.
Yeah.
So it was cool, but, these, I don't know why I haven't learned my lesson, but, these kind of like rap shows are just always kind of not that great, it's just a lot of dicking around. Like, for instance, Ghostface, they started Mysteries of Chess Boxing. They did the whole song and, get to the big, introducing the Ghostface Killah. This, this is our moment here. Stop the song. Doesn't do his verse. Like what? Like what? Why would you do that? So stuff like that. He just started playing old rap songs that he wanted to hear. So he played some Slick Rick, Little Rakim. Big Daddy Kane. That stuff's cool, but not when I paid $40 to see somebody perform. So it was okay. But, you can go to our Instagram. I posted like a little video. It was right when it came out and still had some energy. So you can check that Instagram at Metaphoric Music. I posted it on Twitter. I think I posted a different video on Twitter maybe. So you check that out and let me know. But that's also at Metaphoric Music. So, until you guys go to a concert, we'll talk about mine.
I saw Wu-Tang. I think I've talked about this on the show before, but like a number of years ago, and they were like several hours late, like 3.5 hours late, and they were also yelling at the crowd because we weren't energetic enough, but we were fucking tired from standing there. But I don't know. It was fun anyway. But I don't know. Maybe somebody can let us know. Do the Wu-Tang members yell at the crowd quite often? And in fact, Jizza was like fucked up out of his mind.
That surprises me.
He looked like a zombie, and so I don't know why they were yelling at us. Anyway, we're ready to talk about Biggie.
Yeah.
Come on. Hot, sicker than your average. Papa twist cabbage off instinct. Niggas don't think shit stink. Pink Gators, my Detroit players. Tim's for my hooligans in Brooklyn. Dead right. If the head right, Biggie there every night. Papa been smooth since days of under rules. Never lose.
So Thursday, March 9th was the 20th anniversary of the death of Biggie Smalls, and Pitchfork marked the occasion by reviewing 4 Biggie-related albums, his 2 official studio LPs, Ready to Die from 1994 and Life After Death from 1997, along with Puff Daddy's debut solo album No Way Out from 97, which featured many of the last verses Biggie ever recorded, and the first in a long line of posthumous barrel-scraping cash grabs, Born Again from 1999. The last 2 received pretty low scores, and we discussed the 10 out of 10 classic Ready to Die on a previous episode. So to pay our own respects to Big Papa, we've decided to focus on his somewhat divisive but still classic Life After Death, which received a 9.5 in a review by Chris X. You could fill a book with background information on this album, so we'll try to keep it short. If you're interested in more detail, Pitchfork's reviews of all of these albums are very well done and very interesting. Essentially, Biggie's debut, Ready to Die, is the more bona fide hip-hop classic, and the double LP, Life After Death, turns some fans off with its staggering length, a total of 1 hour and 50 minutes, and its grandiose cinematic flourishes. However, Life After Death captures a truly pivotal moment in hip-hop history. Because its release date was pushed back from the previous fall, the album was probably completed before the September death of Tupac Shakur. Biggie's main rival in the infamous East Coast-West Coast hip-hop rivalry. As such, the enormous size and scope of the album seems designed to raise the bar set by Pac's own double LP and masterpiece All Eyes on Me from 1996, and perhaps to conquer the rap world once and for all. On another level, the fusion of hardcore gangster rap and radio-friendly pop production on Life After Death reflects the mission of Biggie's ambitious right-hand man, Puff Daddy, who saw a future where hip-hop would dominate not just urban radio, but pop culture on a global level. This probably seemed a little bit crazy in the early 90s when white America still saw rap as scary black people music, but looking at music in 2017, there's no doubt that Puffy succeeded beyond his wildest imagination. The diamond-certified Life After Death might have been the turning point. Finally, Biggie himself was killed by an unknown assailant 16 days before this album's release. As such, its paranoid lyrical obsessions with violence resonate in an eerie, tragic, and instantly mythologized way. The reverberations of this war have resonated through the hip-hop world ever since. Of course, Biggie and Tupac are remembered as the greatest rappers ever, but their deaths created a power vacuum that artists like Jay-Z, Nas, DMX, even previously ignored Southern acts like Outkast and the Cash Money roster, would fight to fill. So, talk about this album a little bit. Talk about your familiarity with Biggie. When did you guys pick up on Biggie?
I love this album. I love Biggie. I don't remember exactly when, I heard of him. It's just kind of one of those, I know Mo Money, Mo Problems since I was a little kid. And, I don't remember the first time I ever listened to this. It's just one of those things that's been around so long. I know you're a big, no pun intended, Biggie fan, Gabe. Tell your story.
Wait, did that video for Mo Money, Mo Problems, did that come out after he died? It did, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I was trying to remember. Go ahead.
There's like video clips.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, this is like one of these really, really special personal albums for me. I, went through a phase, as a lot of, like white suburban kids do, of rap is crap. And then I like slowly started to get interested in it, and this was like the album that I first, for some reason, got like deeply obsessed with. It was like one of the ones that sort of opened the world of rap up to me. I really cannot remember how I ended up with this and not Ready to Die, but it just worked out, I don't know, in this amazing way where it was just like I couldn't stop digging through it. In fact, I burned, this was like in my car, I had to burn CDs to listen to them. I burned one disc of like all of my favorite songs, and then I had to burn another disc of the songs that I had left off that one when I got tired of the first disc. So I should have just burnt the original, both discs to begin with. But I listened so much and got obsessed with like the grandiose, like, he actually died and he's like singing about his own death, constantly, or rapping about his own death. And it's, I don't know, it blew my mind. It's spooky, but it blew my mind that rap could be like so much bigger than, the Laffy Taffy shit I heard on the radio. Do you have any memories of liking or discovering Biggie, Darin?
I kind of like Dan. I definitely remember Mo Money, Mo Problems. I definitely recognized Puff Daddy early on. I don't think I had any idea about Biggie dying until I saw like maybe like a VH1 special about it, or there was a lot of talk about it back then. But I didn't. I said this when we talked about Ready to Die, that I just have never been a huge Biggie fan. I definitely have a deep appreciation, and I enjoy listening to it. But I think the scale of both of those albums, and especially this one, is just so overwhelming that I found it very hard to take the time to dig into it.
Yeah, one thing I meant to mention actually was that it's weird that there was no 20th anniversary like tribute thing to Tupac. Like last September would have been 20 years since he died, and I don't remember any of this. But this week, all these publications were talking about him. So I would argue that culture at large has finally realized who the better rapper is. Maybe we'll save some of that for later. Let's describe the sound, though. Let's get into the record. What does it sound like to you guys?
I mean, it is, cinematic. There was this whole thing in the, in the 90s of these, like, rap albums that were like gangster movies, you know. I mean, this only built for Cuban links, Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt,
Right.
and this, I mean, it's like a movie. It gets a little loose at times, you know. I mean, Mo Money Mo Problems kind of doesn't super fit the bill, but yeah, it's incredibly like grandiose, but not in such an annoying way as a lot of other rap albums, like the skits on this. You know, I bitch about skits in 90s rap albums. Like in this, it kind of like works to tie it to this theme. Cuban Links does it too. I don't mind those skits that much. It's just so grandiose and just so. It's like a fantastic, you know, people always talk about concept albums like, you know, shitty ass Dark Side of the Moon and, Sgt. Pepper's and stuff. But like, why don't people mention like this, you know, Life After Death and even really Ready to Die, in that same breath.
I mean, rap in general is like one large concept album.
Yeah, it really is.
You develop a character and you have all these nicknames and, whatever. It's like, that was one thing that was really, really fascinating to me when I was discovering this album. But Darin, how would you add to describing the sound of this?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what you were saying, Dan. I think that this album, in direct comparison with like Ready to Die, it sounds like this one was really pushing towards that sort of Puff Daddy sound you might want to call it.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially with the song like Mo Money Mo Problems. Even Hypnotized to an extent is very, very catchy.
That's been stuck in my head all week.
You can like hear the glam kind of stuff that's coming out, and that does come on. Like I was mentioning when we started talking about this, the video, even though Biggie was gone, like, oh my God, the video, I remember just tons of like diamonds, and like they were in like these like shiny suits, and just
right.
Yeah, the shiny suits, those were great. Somebody needs to bring those
bad
back.
boy era.
Yeah, and it really, I want to get into this maybe towards the end of our discussion, but I would really like to consider the idea of like what would have happened if Biggie lived. But anyway, there's definitely some like great songs on here. I think in total, even though it's like an incredibly long album, individually, there's like an individual set of songs I think are some of my favorites among Biggie's that I like better than even Ready to Die.
Yeah, I don't know. It's often talked about like a double album with no filler. I think that's a little bit generous, but
yeah, I agree.
At least every song has like its own character. So there's some like goofball shit that happens, and in some ways it's fun to like hear Biggie doing that. But like he sings on Playa Hater, and he sounds even more gangster because of how badly he sings. But there's some goofball stuff that happens. Like I Got a Story to Tell is kind of just a fun little like story with this kind of light, little beat accompanying it, and it's interesting. But compared to like Tupac's All Eyes on Me, which is like 30-40% filler, fairly listenable all the way through. Would you guys disagree with that?
No, not at all. I mean, I don't want to jump the gun, no pun intended, with Notorious and the Tupac argument, but yeah, I mean, Biggie, he's got 2 records, and there's maybe 5% filler throughout those.
Yeah,
Tupac's, that filler ratio on his is much higher. So I think there's a clear winner in that battle. But yeah, especially comparing those two, this one has much less filler. Because even songs like Player Hater, which are
they're fun.
It's pretty fillery, but it is kind of fun, and especially when you got 2 hours worth of music here, it's kind of nice to have just like a little like almost funny track of him doing his best at singing.
Yeah, and I think the skits are well placed, well timed,
and there's not that many of them.
There's not that many of them either, and it just seems to break up the tension that's created on some of the his dark lyrics and stuff like that. And it's really interesting because so many, I mean, it feels like everybody in the hip hop world afterwards has like quoted Biggie or said he's paid the respect in some way, but like no one has really done an album quite like this. I mean, I just, when I listen to this, I'm like, man, I just can't think of anybody who has really put together something so grandiose and in scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think what separates it is not necessarily like that kind of concept because, like Dan was saying, there's stuff like that, you know, all throughout hip hop, especially that like mafioso genre in the mid 90s. But there's like an ambition to this, which, you know, I want, like, some people will say it's like sort of Puff Daddy's urging to, like, you know, we got to have a couple pop hits on this thing, and, you know, we always got to be thinking about radio play and stuff. But I really think that, like, Biggie was this very intelligent sort of pop culture icon that I imagine there are a lot of things that he said no to Biggie or to Puffy about, right? Like, because otherwise Biggie just would have been that really terrible bad boy music that Puffy made, like, after Biggie died. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I feel like there was a lot of stuff that, you know, a lot of beats that Puffy brought to him and stuff that were like, oh, this will be big on the radio. And like Biggie just had this like discerning ear where he knew how he could maintain sort of like the street credibility with the pop hit. At the same time, this record has like just a huge ambition of like the beats are so big. Like everything is so big. You know, like when you hear Hypnotize, it just sounds like instantly the kind of song that's just going to take over the airwaves. And I feel like that kind of like reaching for that is always here. I mean, it doesn't like erase the sort of nuances of some of the more like storytelling songs and stuff like that, but everything just feels, you know, big, no pun intended.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And you know, I mean, to your point about Puffy, like if Puffy was trying to get him, you know, oh, you got to think about radio play, would it be like this triple LP, you know, 2 CD, right, 2 hour, you know, thing with only 2 songs that are like, you know, big radio? Was Hypnotize a big hit?
Oh yeah,
it sounds like it should be.
I think like Sky is the Limit was, it's hard to say exactly what, like, stuff, a lot of stuff became a huge hit on this album because Biggie had just died, and, like, you know, Sky's the Limit was like kind of an emotional,
okay, well, even you know, Sky's the Limit, 3 songs on a 2 hour you know, album, or maybe radio friendly.
Going Back to Cali was big.
Okay, well, you know, 4 songs on a 2 hour album. There's still
a good handful of big singles.
I think Hypnotize and Going Back to Cali were definitely singles before he died, though.
Yeah,
because I recall those videos having him like, you know, in it, not in like a posthumous way. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember when singles got. I mean, because obviously the album came out after he died, but I don't know when singles got released.
Well, I mean, it went diamond, right? But it was like, you know, partially because the double album and every sale counts for 2, but. I mean, this was a big album. Like, it was a massive success, and I don't think it was like an accident. I think that's what he was aiming for. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, I was 9 years old when this album came out, and I like can remember Mo Money, Mo Problems like being a song like when I was 9 years old, and yeah. I remember that video Darin's talking about, you know, with the shiny ass suits and stuff. You know, a 9-year-old shouldn't know about Biggie, you know, at that point, but you know, it was just so ubiquitous that, and I didn't know he was dead, or that's why it was maybe on the radio or anything like that. I had no idea, but you know, it was just everywhere. You couldn't escape it. And I think that really speaks to it. Because I don't think, you know, let's bring it back to the Tupac thing. Tupac doesn't have anything like that, really. I mean, maybe like California Love. But besides that, you know, there's not like a Tupac song that is just like that your mom knows, you know. My mom knows Mo Money, Mo Problems. You know, I don't think she knows a Tupac song, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know,
going that was Puffy's take on
it. Right. I was just going to say, like, you know, maybe if Biggie didn't say no to Puffy, we would have seen a lot more of like Mo Money, Mo Problems on this album. You know what I mean? But maybe it was just good
too
enough.
Many of those would have hurt the credibility, right?
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Mo Money, Mo Problems is a great song. It would suck if there was a whole record of Mo Money, Mo Problems, but having that one track, you know, Hypnotize is also great. Really, I mean, every song on this is, but like he didn't pack it just with those radio songs. And
yeah, but you can tell that he's like thought about this because you know, we get this intro and then we could kick it off with Hypnotize, but instead we go to like one of his grittiest street tales. Somebody's got to die, you know, and it's like that sequencing, which we always talk about. You know, he is like, you know, Puffy would rather have him do a whole record of Mo Money, Mo Problems, but he like is just so, I think, discerning where he knows what the image he's trying to create, the story he's trying to tell. And there is a hell of a story here. I mean, like those last 3 tracks of like, you know, eventually at the end, he's saying like, you're nobody till somebody kills you. And like the way that just resonates
so spooky.
right after his death is insane. I don't know. It's an incredible thing. Why do you guys think that it's basically nobody's favorite Biggie album compared to Ready to Die?
I think it's because Ready to Die is much more digestible. Ready to Die is a normal length album. It's much easier to just put on in the car. You'll finish it, in your trip. Life After Death is somewhat of a commitment. I mean, if you're going to listen to the whole thing, that's 2 hours. That's much longer than your average car ride. That you're sitting down to listen to this album. And Ready to Die, I think, is the easier one to listen to. And that's not really like a dig on Ready to Die or Life After Death. I think that's another good thing about Biggie is that he could do both. It's hard to carry an album this long, and he does it.
Yeah.
But I think that's why Ready to Die is the de facto classic here. Is much more digestible.
Well, and it seems to have a little bit less of the sort of radio friendly glam rap that comes soon after.
Yeah, I think like the hardcore hip hop heads, they really prefer the Ready to Die approach. And a single like Big Papa or Juicy is like more street than pop, really, even though they've really exploded as well. So I mean, when it comes to the score, it got a 9.5. I mean, this is like a personal 10 to me, but I would sort of agree on an objective level that a 9.5 makes sense because it's just so big that there are gonna be flaws. Like, I Got a Story to Tell. I love that song. He tells this like a crazy story, and nobody is a better storyteller in rap than Biggie. I can say that definitively. Nobody tells a better story than him. About like sleeping with a NBA player's wife. Apparently it's true. I don't know. But then he, the guy comes home, so the only thing he can think to do is act like he's robbing her, and then the NBA player starts giving us all this money and stuff. So it's really, really entertaining, like amazing. Nobody can tell a story like him. And then the second half of the track is like him, like sort of a skit while the beat continues to play of him telling the same story to his friend, but in normal conversation. It's like, did we need that? There's just a lot of stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty difficult to have a over 2 hour album, that's not some sort of like ambient or drone or something that's a perfect 10. So I think I agree with you. Personally, I like this album a lot. It's hard to not say it's a personal 10, maybe like a 9.8 or something. But a 9.5 score, I think, is fair overall.
Yeah, I think I like the 9.5 both on a personal level and a objective level. But before we move on, I did want to just ask one quick question. Like, we kind of alluded to it by talking about Puff Daddy and everything. But do you guys think, what if like Biggie and like Tupac like didn't die? Like how many rap careers would have been ruined? How many rap songs that reference those two would have been ruined if they didn't die, and like, do you think
it's an interesting way to look at it?
Do you think that Biggie would have just turned into like a glam rap kind of Puff Daddy thing, maybe ended up on like Law and Order, like Ice-T many years later,
I mean, that's hard to say. You like to say no, he would have resisted, maybe he would have left Bad Boy Entertainment or something, to keep his cred, but, maybe he wouldn't. And, is it a bad thing to do that? I mean, are you going to say Ice Cube sucks now because he's, makes children's movies? Like, no, Ice Cube's still the man. He just, he's old now. And same with Ice-T and stuff. Those Ice guys really into making family friendly movies. It's hard to say. I feel like, I don't want to be like sacrilegious or whatever in the rap world, but I feel like Tupac wouldn't be as absolutely like revered if he didn't die. I mean, I'm not disputing that All Eyes on Me is like a fantastic record and stuff, but I don't think he would have held up to that standard. I think it'd be somebody like Snoop Dogg who's like around and like nobody disputes that he's cool and he's like had some classics, but he's still churning out like some shit nobody cares about. Like what's the last Snoop Dogg record you listen to? But no one says.
I mean,
it sucks.
like hip hop would have carried on, and left them behind,
Yeah,
right?
for
But yeah, I think they would have that kind of like Godfather status that Snoop Dogg has. I don't know. I mean, in some way, I feel like it just had to happen. Like
It really does.
this weird.
It just feels like it.
There was this weird thing happening where it was like, I don't know. It was like this really like violent street world. It was just like these really violent people getting like unprecedented fame. I mean, before Biggie and Tupac, rap wasn't like this.
I mean,
And
remember
all of a sudden,
the Source Awards used to be like there was like people who like fired shots on stage at the Source Award. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be crazy violent.
I know. So it was just not. At a certain point, you're gonna have like these legitimate gangsters like having so much money and fame that like something bad was gonna happen, and hip hop needed, I think, like something like this to happen for it to level out in a weird way. Like you needed like these legends, like you needed these true legends, like you needed a Beatles of rap for things to then like blossom into this truly global phenomenon that we have now. I don't know, if it wasn't Biggie and Tupac, maybe it would have been somebody else. Maybe it would have been Jay-Z or something, right? Like he was a real genuine hustler that probably learned a lesson from losing, one of his best friends, Biggie. But, whoever it would have been, like this was going to happen. And in a way, hip hop needed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, to quote the man himself, somebody's got to die.
That's a good ending.
I was trying to be real poignant there.
I don't know how to follow that up there, so.
All right. Well, we ready to move on to the reviews?
Yeah.
Got me singing along with some half-hearted victory song. Won't you follow me down to the Rose Parade? Won't you follow me down to the Rose Parade?
All right, you just heard a snippet from our first proper review this week, Elliott Smith's Either Or. Just to remind you, though, when Pitchfork reviews something, they review it on a 0 to 10 scale, somewhere around 8.2 or 8.3. They give it a BNM if it's a new release, or BNR if it's a reissue of an old album, anthology, greatest hits, something like that. So, Dan, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, first off, we had Elliott Smith's Either Or, the expanded edition, which on Tuesday got a 10 in a BNR review by Matt LeMay. Some background on that one. This came out in 1997, just like Life After Death. By now, just about everybody knows Elliott Smith, the tortured indie genius who transitioned from hushed lo-fi folk to widely inventive pop arrangements that, for many, rival the Beatles' best late 60s studio innovations. Consumed by depression and substance abuse, Smith allegedly committed suicide in 2003 at the age of 34, but this passionately devoted fan base has grown rapidly ever since. He is now universally recognized as one of the true legends of indie music, but fans always seem split between his early acoustic work and his later, more expansive major label records. For this reason, Either Or is usually seen as Smith's crowning achievement. It was his last album before jumping to the majors and strikes a perfect balance between that intimate acoustic lo-fi and one-man pop composition and arrangement. Perhaps LeMay's review for Pitchfork puts it best. According to him, the album, quote, marks the last time Smith's instincts would outpace the studio resources to execute them. It's extraordinary how he embodies a magical, alchemical mix of intimacy and bombast. Side note, the 20th anniversary reissue includes a handful of live recordings and demos, but for the purpose of this review, we're just going to talk about the original album because who gives a shit about bonus tracks? So I know you guys have heard of Elliott Smith, but what are your previous feelings? Are you an early Smith man, later Smith man? What are your feelings on him?
So I've always actually been more of the, and you guys may hate me for this, but the late Smith fan, a little bit more of the major label Elliott Smith fan. This is actually
you would be.
I've always struggled to love this album. I love EXO. Spent a lot of time listening to that. I've really tired that record out. But this one has always been one that I just have struggled to get into, and even coming back to it, it just kind of made me want to listen to EXO more and more. What about you, Gabe?
It's hard to say like which side I'm on. but I know that I think I heard this album first, and I like sort of loved the melodies and everything, just loved a lot about it. But I found there's a certain like quality to Elliott Smith's early work that's sort of like almost drony or like monotonous. You know what I mean? Like like Needle in the Hay is like, it's almost like tonally like on the same chord for most of the song, you know? And you hear a little bit of that in here. And then I remember when I got to XO, it sort of blew my mind that it was like, it just felt to me at the time like everything that he was trying to do before. Eventually I sort of just came to appreciate, and by appreciate, I mean like hungrily, obsessively devour everything that Elliott Smith ever did. But, for a good while, I was sort of the later Smith kind of guy. It just was so influential to me to like hear what one person could do, as I would start learning how to make and record my own music and everything. What about you, Dan?
I've never been like that obsessive Elliott Smith fan. I've always respected him. I like this record a lot. I like his early stuff. I'm an early fan, I would say. But I never got like ridiculously into him. I've never listened to anything, outside his regular records. I'm not a bootleg chaser or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with him being, an absolute like legend of this indie, lo-fi world. That would come much later. So go ahead and describe the sound of Either Or for us.
So it's I think the little background thing you gave sort of sums it up. It's like that sort of solo, intimate acoustic guitar type of thing, but he's using quite like lo-fi recording techniques to basically do everything you possibly could in this setting, where it's like there will be multiple guitar, overdubs, and they're like all playing different sort of melodic lines. And then, he always double tracks his vocals. That was something that sort of like blew my mind when I was younger, because it's hard to record vocals when you're first learning how to record things, but if you double track them, you can make everything sound smooth and lovely. So he's got like this whispery hushed thing going on, but then there's like lots of stuff going on. There's even like guitar solos occasionally. There's like, really complex drum arrangements, where it like sort of starts off in like sort of these back and forth acoustic guitars, and then sort of like drums and bass will come in for like a flourish, and then they'll drop back out. There's just so much like that inventiveness that really explodes later, but it's quite fun to hear it like in such a he's pushing his recording technology to its limits.
Yeah, I think I would just kind of add that it has like a it has like a bit of a quietness to it, like a hushed sound, like almost like the whole thing is somewhat being like restricted versus like XO, which just sounds like all the resources were available to him. I mean, it was kind of described that way in the review. I will say though, and Pitchfork points this out as well, that the remastered edition that, I don't know if you guys were listening to that, seems to still like maintain that lo-fi sound, which I thought was like really cool. It actually kind of had me wondering like, wow, did they even really remaster some of this? Because you can hear, a lot of tape hiss and, well,
I mean, you can't like remaster that.
Well, I mean, but
it is like a cheap 4-track recorder, but
but I mean, there's definitely ways to like clean things up, and it would change the integrity of the album, and they didn't do that, which I thought was a good move for sure.
Yeah, I mean, something like this, you don't want it like too cleaned up. I think that's what's kind of special about it. I really, you mentioned this a little bit, Gabe, but I really love the like sound of the drums on this album. Like if it was not this album, if it was any other kind of album, they like would kind of sound like shit. Like at times, they almost sound like a cardboard box or something. But it just works so well, like with the way his vocals are so reserved and hushed and quiet. It just like flows perfectly. It's almost like there's like a weird like haze on this album. Like and I guess that's the lo-fi thing, but it's like it's hard to describe, but it's like you're listening through some sort of filter where you can't, like a dirty window, you can't see it all.
Yeah.
And that I think that gets overused and stuff later on, but he was one of the like innovators of it, and I think Either Or has got to be, if not the pinnacle, one of that whole kind of lo-fi hazy type sound.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's gone from, when I first discovered Elliott Smith, he felt like this special gem that I was lucky to have discovered. And I guess he has that quality about him, but now it feels like he's sort of, one of the undisputed legends of indie music. Like this album feels like one of the, top 10, top 15 albums of the 90s almost universally. And I don't remember it being like that. Do either of you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, was it just because we were teenagers and maybe we heard this a little bit before our peers, or did he genuinely become this famed icon or whatever? I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, I mean, because we, there's definitely a lot of people that were getting names thrown around. I mean, even Kurt Cobain. I mean, people who had died young and were major rock stars or whatever. And Elliott Smith just was like, I don't know, it seemed unheard of, and it seemed like if you were listening to Elliott Smith, then you were like really, you had some serious credibility if you were listening to that kind of stuff and taking inspiration from that. But now it's like no big deal,
Right. Everybody. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess, he died like in 2003 and it just felt like, as opposed to Kurt Cobain, it felt like he went out like with a whisper, which was like just so Elliott Smith anyway. You know what I mean? He just sort of like disappeared. And I like when labels do this. Like, this is the 20th anniversary. It's a good time to go back and reassess. And I think it hadn't occurred to me until this week, really. But looking back now, he's like a juggernaut of indie, of lo-fi music. I was listening to, actually, I want to shout them out, not that they are listening or anything, but I think like Kill Rockstars actually funded a podcast series that's been going on. It's sort of a limited run leading up to the release of this reissue. It's called Say Yes, and it's sort of just like interviews with various musicians and artists and stuff that knew Elliott or sometimes didn't and are just obsessed with his work. But somebody was talking about how, like, when they first put on Frank Ocean's Blonde, like they could just hear Elliott Smith all over it. Now, obviously, he's like sampled or something in one of the tracks, but just that sort of like the way that he uses guitars and it's sort of like hushed and intimate and stuff. It's not just lo-fi indie. I think you can feel this sort of permeating through music on a level that I really didn't appreciate until this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I didn't really think about the Frank Ocean thing, but now that you say that, I can see Smith's fingerprints on that album in particular.
Yeah, I still find that almost hard to believe, just because Elliott Smith has just never, my whole like musical life, I guess, I just never really considered him to be such a juggernaut, I guess, but he certainly is.
It's weird, right?
Yeah, it's still
like is.
It's still
when
weird.
you watch the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame like induction ceremonies and stuff, and I don't know, that like they're inducting somebody like the Velvet Underground who nobody listened to, when they were out, or like Nick Drake, same story, right? It's like this feels like when we're like in our 60s and the musicians of our era are like old and annoying, like the Rolling Stones or something. They're all going to be shouting out Elliott Smith. He's going to be like this legend, like on the level of Leonard Cohen or something. But I guess we're sort of talking about Smith in general. As far as this record goes, Darin, you said you have never connected with it as much as maybe you'd like to. I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, don't you feel like there are a number of songs here that are like some of the most touching things that he's ever written?
Yeah, I mean, first one that comes to mind is probably Between the Bars. Which is definitely an excellent song.
Rose Parade,
Pictures of Me. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some great songs over there, but a lot of them make me feel like he just somehow kind of topped them with EXO, and I guess that shouldn't take away, from them, because they're still great songs, but like I had sort of mentioned about the sound, it sounded like there was like some sort of restriction, like he just didn't, that he wasn't able to go as far as he wanted to go. Not that hurts the record or anything, because it's still a wonderful.
I mean, you don't think that's cool? That it sounds like it's sort of bursting at the seams or something?
I mean, I think that is cool, but I guess I've just always considered XO to be like just so perfectly executed, and that, you know, coming back to
full
this
fulfillment.
Yeah, that this just sounds like the sketch or the blueprint that then became, you know, XO. But I still like this album, but to me it's not even close to XO.
See, I like the idea of not having everything at your fingertips. I think we've complained before, you know, when a band gets too big and it ruins them because they have everything at their finger. You know, restriction breeds innovation, I think, and I think this record is obviously restricted, and I think because of that he becomes inventive, like you talked about, like the double tracking of vocals and guitar and stuff.
Right.
You know, if you have like some big giant studio, you could just like have another guy play guitar, or like, you know, use this special, you know, piano or something. I think it's nice to sometimes not have that available. And, you know, I mean, XO is a good record, but I don't like that nearly as much as either or. And mostly for those reasons.
Yeah. Can you appreciate that, Darin? Like, why I would say about half, if not more, of Elliott's like really passionate fan base, you know, feels like a deeper connection to his like acoustic early stuff. Do you get that? Or to you, is that just like completely like, why don't you like XO more?
No, I mean, I get that. I totally get that. And, you know, maybe if I didn't connect so much with XO right out of the gate, I would feel differently. But I guess there's just something about the way XO was like so perfectly executed that, you know, and at the time when I was really listening to it, I didn't really think of it in terms of like, oh, he can finally do whatever he wants. He's on a major label. This is what it should sound like. It was never like that. It was just like, man, this is amazing. It's like listening to and falling in love with, like, I don't know, maybe like Revolver or something like that so early on, and then going back and listening to the early records, and you can see how things were leading up to that, I guess. But, you know, you still think that Revolver is the best, you know what I mean? Yeah,
I get that. Okay, so, you know, it got a perfect 10. I think, you know, as our conversation has sort of indicated, you actually cannot go wrong with Elliott Smith. You can grab any of his records and it's going to be amazing. But I, of course, agree with the score. I think it's a 10, and it feels weird to say because I feel like when I was in high school, I would have thought, oh, I mean, this can't be a 10. It's just like this little hidden gem that, you know, nobody knows about. Like, I feel really close to it, but how could it be a 10? Like one of the greatest records of all time or something like that. But now, you know, it feels like easy to say that. Yeah, for sure it is. I guess I'm hesitating. I don't know if I can call it my favorite Elliott Smith record, but it's like, it's at least tied with whatever my favorite is. What do you guys think about that score?
I will say it's my favorite Elliott Smith record, and like I said at the top, I'm not a huge Elliott Smith fan or anything, but I think that this record is like earned its place in the pantheon of you know, classic records. So I think it's hard to argue that this album isn't a 10.
Well, I'm not going to give it a 10.
Of course you won't.
Oh my god!
You know, I think it is a well-deserved 9.8. I think the extra funds he gets with the major label, you know,
direct all hate mail to Darin.
I just can't do it. I can't do it. You know, I can't just give it a 10 just because. So I've 9.8. 9.8 is pretty good.
All right. Well, yeah. Before we get any deeper in that hole.
So our next album was J-Sum's Everybody Works, which on Friday received an 8.6 BNM with a review by Judy Berman. A little bit of background. J-Sum is a Bay Area bedroom pop project from 22-year-old Melina Duterte, may have said that wrong, and I apologize, who plays every instrument on her records and quite literally records in her bedroom. Everybody Works is her first official album, but she got her big break after uploading a collection of demos to Bandcamp in 2015, which she described as 9 finished and unfinished songs in no particular order. The collection was eventually issued by 2 different labels under the name Turn Into, which received an impressive 8.2, although no BNM, from Pitchfork, and landed her a spot opening for Mitski and Japanese Breakfast on tour. Woohoo! In a recent Pitchfork profile, Duterte recounts a very unique musical background and reveals some pretty diverse musical interests. Her dad worked as a cheesy-ass disco DJ in the 70s and 80s. She played jazz trumpet throughout high school and planned to enroll in a conservatory program, but decided to study music production at a local community college instead. Thank goodness. Discovering Phil Elverum and seeing him perform changed her life. She's now smitten with pop acts like Carly Rae Jepsen, Blood Orange, and Lorde. Somehow you can kind of hear all of this reflected in Everybody Works, but we'll get to that in a bit. So, have you guys ever heard of Jason?
I have not, no.
No, not at all. I would have liked to see that tour. I didn't even know all those people toured together.
Yeah, that would have been amazing, actually.
Sounds like your dream, Darin.
Yeah, indeed. So how would you guys describe the sound of Everybody Works?
So it's, I like the way that the review talks about it, which is it's like bedroom pop, but quite big sounding. In fact, I think it's got a lot in common with Elliott Smith in a weird way. Elliott Smith is obviously much more lo-fi, but it sounds like it was recorded in a bedroom, but in today's world, you can do so much in your bedroom. And it's got like this huge sound, but also this like hushed intimacy, particularly in the way she sings. I was sort of impressed by the way it was like, walking that line between, it's sort of intimate, but it's also really big.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure if it's, just an advancement in technology or what, but like, especially the instrumentation, like, there's times like, you maybe wouldn't guess it was recorded in a bedroom. Like that always like kind of sounds good. But it does flirt that line. She kind of has that hush vocal, thing that Elliott has. But yeah, it's like very thinly on that line of sounding like a bedroom and sounding like a studio. But I'm not convinced that that's not just because it's 2017.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would really add is, I felt like in reading the Pitchfork review, it was sort of written in a way that was like surprising to me as I was listening and then reading that review, in the sense that like when I first listened to it, I was thinking for sure that this was a band, that
right.
There was no way this was like a single person, let alone somebody who was only 22, which was, very shocking.
Yeah.
But just all the more impressive. I think that this album is pretty far reaching. Like, again, it's the first album from somebody, or first, I guess, official album. That was just eye opening. To think
it's very self-assured.
Yeah. And just sounds very confident, like matured, like somebody who's been writing music for quite a long time, which I guess she has been, but still, I mean, to be 22 and to put something like this out, I mean, is just, makes me question why I ever even tried to write music in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so how about like the genre? I mean, there's obviously like a 90s kind of guitar rock thing going on here, but
little shoegazy at times.
Yeah, very, very shoegazy at times. But you can hear that like pop stuff that she seems to dig, like the Carly Rae Jepsens and stuff like that, where this girl can write a hook. Like some of the hooks here just kill. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what seems to be missing from music. Like, we've been reviewing stuff that's like kind of similar to this in some vein. But
what was that thing last week? Vagabond?
Yeah, that was just, it was missing that sort of element. You know what?
No hooks.
Do you guys listen to Broadcast? I think you did, Gabe, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, man, this is what really, like, I love Broadcast. Always love them. And this is the first album I've listened to where I'm like, this is like, the heir apparent to what Broadcast had kind of laid forth, early 2000s and stuff. Yeah,
I would agree with that. So is there anything you would add to the genre? Did you hear any, like, I guess I'm curious, Dan, if, sometimes we talk about like car seat headrests or Mitski or whatever, and you're just like, I'm doing the jerk off, like hand motion right now. You can't see it, but like, we could just listen to 90s bands. Did you feel that way about this?
I mean, I think that hand motion is exactly my feelings on this genre as a whole.
Come on, man.
But this record, it started out like Lipstick Stains. It was like very shoegazy, very lush. I was like, I might actually dig this. I had a little sense of optimism. But then, the second song, Bus Song, it just goes into that. I don't know. It just sounds like fetishizing like that early 90s, indie rock stuff that just like, we've had
kind of
it.
Like a dream pop, late 80s sometimes.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, just, we've had this for 20 years already. And, there's plenty of better examples of it. This album was not as bad as something like last week's Vagabond, but it still is just, when this episode's done, I can safely say I'll never listen to this record again. I just don't get like, I mean, maybe it's me, but it just, I just don't I see no reason for this genre to exist anymore.
See, I feel different. There's something like fresh about this. There's an interesting mixture, I think. Like, it's not just like 90s fetishism in the way that I don't think like Mitski is just 90s fetishism or car seat headrest. Like there's some like, it's like a new voice with something new to say. And like the voice here is like just a damn fine like songwriter, like actually an incredibly good songwriter. Like, and one thing I want to bring up, like, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like, you listen to like the Bus Song, right? And it like escalates in hooks, and then there's finally like the hookiest of hooks finally happens, and you're like, damn, that was so catchy. But it only happens like twice, and kind of like briefly. And so like when I first put this record on, I was like, I just have to listen to that song again. And then I had the same thing when I got to Baby, which is like the most popish song here. Like it like sort of has a funkiness to it, like a pop song. And, at the end when like those like high register vocals come in, like the real high ones, it is like transcendently catchy. But it only happens, once. Like she repeats the thing a couple times. And I started to feel like it's weird because, when I was listening to sort of like latter day Weezer after we recorded our Weezer episode the other week, and like latter day Weezer, it's like Rivers has become such a good songwriter that the songs are so tight they can't breathe, sort of. Like, I'm like, dude,
he's got like a playbook
or it's like, maybe, that bridge was great. Could you have done it more than 1.5 measures, maybe? Like, just let it ride a little bit? Or like did the solo have to be 4.3 seconds long? We could have grooved a little bit with that. I felt sometimes on this record, like, she's such a good songwriter that I don't know. Is that a good thing that I just had to play it again because the song itself wasn't satisfying enough, or what?
I mean, I see what you're saying, and I think I had a lot of the same experience because like a song like you mentioned Baby and the Bus Song, but I'd even say like 1 Billion Dogs was another kind of highlight, high energy song that almost felt like it came and went. I mean, it's under 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And could it have been like a 4.5 minute song of just that same sort of energy? Probably, and I probably would have loved it just the same. But I don't think. I think that it's a testament to her, kind of knowing when enough is enough. You know what I mean? And not. Maybe this is sort of something that I wouldn't say amateurs, but maybe like new songwriters, new artists like to do is explore an idea and maybe take it a little bit too far without realizing it, you know what I mean? But to like cut it down and keep it to a nice, crisp 3 minutes or under, seems like it just shows like maturity and like confidence that like, like everything I needed to say has been said, you know what I mean? And I really admire that.
Yeah, I mean, you say everything I've said or I need to say has been said. I feel that about this genre as a whole. It's just, it's all the.
God, how did I walk into this?
Yeah, you fell right into that one, but just I don't get the point, and we don't need more of these albums. Like this is just what like this is just the most like Bandcamp thing to me. There's so like why is this record better than Joe Blow's album on Bandcamp? Like they just all they all blend together so much for me. And maybe it's just because like I hate this genre. I've never really liked this kind of stuff, but
I mean, I'll tell you why it's better. It's because this album in particular doesn't sound like a Bandcamp album. It sounds like a proper, well thought out piece of artwork. Whereas Bandcamp is just kind of like, here's my 3 or 4 best songs I've got. You know what I mean?
See, to me, it sounds. I mean,
like
because
her first album.
exactly like her first album, which I've never heard, but just from the description of it, it was like that Bandcamp thing. And then she's on a major, or not a major label, but a major indie label. She's on Polyvinyl, which is of Montreal, American football.
Right.
It's a big indie label. I mean, this sounds kind of like somebody on Bandcamp who's got a few bucks behind them.
Oh, I disagree. I mean, I think like she's a great arranger. Like, so the only song where she stretches out, ironically, I was just complaining about how like everything feels so tight. The last song, For Light, is about 7.5 minutes, and it really stretches out in a broken social scene kind of way.
Yeah.
And in fact, we get like this incredible horn section comes in, just like a lot of like my favorite broken social scene albums or songs. And it's just like, it just is huge sounding. And like the arrangement, just the way that thing like builds and blows up is like, I mean, this is not just your run of the mill Bandcamp.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's Bandcamp with
no, it's not money. It's like compositional skill.
Yeah.
It's like arrangement. It's like the way that song actually builds and crescendos is like
well, all right. I'll give it
perfectly logical the whole way.
I'll give it the best of Bandcamp then.
And I mean, again, to think that this is just one person kind of coming up with this and not like a band of people sort of adding ideas. And
I will agree that is impressive that it is,
because like, my God, I'm willing to say that this album is as good as anything like Mitski has put out, maybe even better. You know what I mean? Just
that's not hard to
scope.
do, but...
Killing me, man.
I know.
Okay, so I mean, when we talk about the score, 8.6, I mean, I think I agree with that score. And I'm kind of feeling like, we'll probably complain about this on a future episode if it stays like pretty dismal, but this year has not been that great for music. And this is like one of my favorite records. I don't know if that's because the year is real bad, but, or if this is just so good, but I enjoy it. I'll listen to the song Baby every day until I die. I feel like, maybe I'll probably get sick of it, but like right now it's the catchiest thing like in the world to me right now. And, so I might bump the score up a little bit, like an 8.8 or something, but it's like already sort of one of my favorite records of the year.
I'll never listen to this again. This year has been abysmal. I mean, I couldn't tell you 5 albums I liked this year. I mean, honestly, Sun Kill Moon's maybe the only thing I've really liked. And this is just, another one of those, it's boring. It's better than something like Vagabond last week, but it's not great. It's it's like I think I'd give it like a 6.5.
Wait, would you put it like, so rank these 3?
Okay.
J-Sum, Mitski, and Car Seat Headrest.
Okay.
I mean, I think I like this a little bit more than Car Seat Headrest. Car Seat Headrest,
Wow.
that's the last one. That one's going on the bottom.
Wow, I am
They were
so
the
offended
worst.
right now.
They were the
They're
worst.
so high on my top 10.
I don't remember what I don't remember what I gave that album last year, but probably a 0. That's probably what it is.
Whoa.
What? No, you didn't.
Nah, I did. I think I gave it a 5, probably.
You're just being provocative.
I am. But yeah,
All right,
of those
rank
3, Car Seat's the worst. And this was probably the best. Mitski was not that great either. But I mean, it's like
I'm so pissed. Right
saying this is better than Mitski is not the highest compliment I can pay it. So yeah, like a 6.5. I'll give it.
God, so painful.
Just
to
don't
listen
need
to.
it anymore. Just stop making bedroom indie rock, please.
Oh my God,
It's 2017.
If Dan could somehow control like the music of the world, and just like so many genres would just be dead.
No, we
I
don't.
know.
Really, all we need anymore is rap and weird things that involve electronics. That's if you're not doing that. Get out of here.
All right, Darin, what are you thinking about that score?
I of course Really, really enjoyed this record. I'm willing to bump it up a couple of points. I'd even consider maybe even a 9.0. And that
That's
could be
ridiculous.
because this year has been pretty weak. That could be that reason. But yeah, I mean, by far probably the best album that's come out. Hopefully there will be more great albums to come, but this one is a favorite of mine.
All right, well, before we move on to the next album, we just want to remind you to hit that subscribe button. Help us out a lot by leaving us a nice review in the iTunes store or telling a friend about the podcast or doing both of those things. And thanks to everybody who has done all those things already. Also, email, Facebook, message us, tweet us, any of that stuff. Follow along with Pitchfork's reviews. Tell us your thoughts on the albums you know we'll be discussing, or you can ask us anything at all. That's metaphoricmusic@gmail.com. All the social media things are at Metaphoric Music. So let's hear a bit of our Sunday review.
All right, you just heard a snippet of our Sunday classic this week, Thelonious Monk with Monk's Music, which on Sunday got a 9.1 in a review by Ben Ratliff. A little bit of background, actually kind of a lot of background here, but I'll try to get through it quickly. It was originally released in 1957, which is actually the earliest Sunday classic that Pitchfork has done so far. Thelonious Monk is an absolute juggernaut of jazz music, responsible for composing numerous jazz standards. In fact, he is the second most recorded jazz composer after Duke Ellington, which is nuts because Ellington wrote over 1,000 pieces and Monk wrote about 70. And he's also well known for helping to invent the jazz style known as bebop, as well as the later incarnation hard bop. Like, terrified of like some jazz aficionado writing into the show and saying I got some fucking term wrong. Pitchfork's review has some great background information on bebop, but here's a simplified version of the genre's history. Essentially, in the 20s and 30s, orchestral band leaders like Duke Ellington had created a fiery and extremely complex, but still very danceable genre called swing. But by the 40s, white people had fucked it all up like they always do and turned swing into really bland big band music, the kind of shit that your like grandparents like. In response, a new generation of jazz artists led by Monk, as well as by people like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, shrunk jazz bands down to just a handful of musicians and used all of that freed up space to improvise and experiment wildly with just about every aspect of musical theory. Bebop is often called musicians' music. It would be difficult to explain its every innovation, but for one example, these artists stopped worrying about making people dance, music people could dance to. You know, it's kind of similar to like the way IDM kind of innovated electronic music because you didn't have to worry about, you know, making people dance anymore. So drummers shifted rhythm keeping duties from like the bass drum to the hi-hat. This frees up every other drum to play in different meters or, you know, blast in on unexpected beats, et cetera, et cetera. Indeed, bebop was a watershed moment in music history because it's so fast and so slow, so dense and so empty all at the same time. Monk's piano playing fits this description exactly. It's often very blocky and dissonant. He changes keys at like a whim. He uses silence like it's a part of the piano. His sheer inventiveness set the bar for a whole new generation of musicians and eventually led to the complete destruction of all musical quote-unquote rules in the approaching genre of free jazz, right, where just everything is nuts. This particular album was recorded in one day during a burst of creativity from Monk. The previous few years had been tough for him. His mother died, a fire destroyed his apartment and a lot of his equipment, and a spurious drug charge left him unable to perform in New York's jazz clubs for a while. But as with all jazz releases, the most important component is the interplay of the group. Most notably, John Coltrane played tenor sax on these sessions, fresh after getting kicked out of Miles Davis's so-called first great quintet because of his severe heroin addiction. The legendary Coleman Hawkins is also on tenor, and we get a strong contender for best jazz drummer of all time in Art Blakey. Filling out the combo are a few lesser-known musicians playing trumpet, alto sax, and bass, which Pitchfork's review calls comparatively weak links. But, you know, compared to Monk, Coltrane, Hawkins, and Blakey, let's not like judge too harshly for being weak links there. So, Whew, guys, what is your previous familiarity with jazz in general, Thelonious in particular?
I love jazz. Especially free jazz. I think Art Blakey is not only one of the best jazz drummers, but one of the best drummers. Period. I love Monk. I'm pretty familiar with all of this in general. How about you, Darin?
I love jazz, but I don't really want to pretend to be like a jazz snob or an expert. I've listened to a lot of the great albums. Definitely love digging into it. I like Thelonious. I don't think I've listened to him nearly as much as others like Coltrane or, Miles Davis and stuff. But I've always, he's definitely somebody, he's definitely a name that I've heard quite a bit and I've always wanted to explore more. But this was my first time with Monk's music.
I've gone through phases where I get like deeply obsessed with jazz. I sort of like really like, I feel this way about hip hop too, where like music where the history of it is such an important component, is so fascinating to me.
Yeah,
it's
like, fun.
Love that shit.
Yeah,
it's really, really fun to like sort of research and be like, oh, who was playing with who, and
yeah, that's cool.
Who was like reacting against who, and so I just love that. So I get like really obsessed with that. Occasionally, I love Thelonious so much. He's actually sort of one of my favorites, although I had not listened to this particular album. I don't think it's like a really bona fide classic in Monk's canon, but this is my first experiences with this record. So let's try to describe the sound of it. I guess it's a little tricky, but can we describe the sound in general? Can we describe how Monk plays piano?
I think that blocky, description you said in your intro is pretty good at times. It's like it's super hard to describe, but yeah, I mean, he just gets like real blocky at times. Which, when you say it that way, that kind of sounds like, oh, so he sucks at piano, but it's not. It's like he can use that like dissonance and that just like blocky thing. It just sounds so
long pauses.
It just sounds so perfect, but it's one of those things that on paper sound like it's going to be awful, but it works. He makes it work somehow, which is a testament to how great he is.
What would you add to describing the sound, Darin?
I actually did not know that Coltrane was on this record, but you can definitely hear
he yells Coltrane at the beginning.
Does he?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he yells at him to jump in on the first solo of Well, You Needn't.
Oh, I missed
good
that,
listening, Darin.
Well,
yeah.
I don't listen to jazz hoping to hear somebody speak or talk or anything like that. So, but no, I mean, it's kind of like what you were saying. It's like so cool, like hearing different people like this. I definitely think that Coltrane's presence is definitely felt. The blockiness of the piano, yeah, I guess I sort of agree with that. I'm not like a jazz aficionado or anything like that, but overall, I mean,
it's like, he like pauses so long sometimes between, like, it's like you don't know, you're like, is he done? And sometimes he is done, and then it's just like empty. And
yeah, and that adds to it.
Yeah, I think that's like the whole innovation of bebop and stuff, is that like the empty space, like big band music is like, or even swing is like filling every space. They have these like full bands, like truly, with like horn sections and everything. And it's like all of a sudden you get rid of all that and you just like reduce it to the really core components, and you have like all this like free space, and you can like, you listen to like somebody like Charlie Parker, right? Like he's like wiggling around like between beats and stuff. You're like, where the fuck is he? Like, I lost him. It gets crazy. Like when you open up the space, and I think like Monk is so about that. Like, cause he sounds like he's thinking. It sounds like he's thinking really hard between every chord. So it's like, sometimes it's just like a while passes and he hasn't hit a chord yet, and it's like where'd he go? And then you realize you're like focusing on like just like the lightest like bass line, with like just a little bit of hi-hat and stuff, and you're like, it's so empty. And then like when all of a sudden Art Blakey like does this crazy fucking fill and Coltrane like comes rushing in, it like blows your mind.
Right. Yeah, like hits you like a bus.
It feels very alive, you know what I mean? Like and very vibrant, and like they're the musicians are feeding off each other, and that's what makes this type of jazz and when you have these juggernauts playing together, like so cool, because it's like, it's like they're reading each other's mind. I mean, I don't know, like when I listen to this style of jazz, like I don't imagine like them writing any of this down or like trying to carefully compose everything. Like some of this stuff just feels like it's just in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's one thing that, like, you know, all these jazz reissues, I think we've mentioned this before, but, like, jazz reissues are so annoying. They're always adding, like, so many different takes. They'll stick them in the middle, you know, not just at the end and stuff. And this record's been, you know, on Tidal, there's, like, 3 or 4 different versions with, you know, various shit stuck, you know, every which way. And I think that kind of, like... And sometimes, you know, sometimes it's fun to dig into that with things, but, like, on the, you know... The original album itself, I think it's like so important to not, you know, especially before you're like incredibly familiar with it, to not listen to that stuff, because like Darin said, it is like, it's fun to like just hear how they're playing off each other, and it is like there's like this looseness to it, you know. It's, and I think I love this about like, you know, experimental music and stuff. Like I love that idea of like just having like a skeleton of a song, and then you know, not being limited, you know, if the mood strikes you to do this, you know, you do this. If it strikes you to do that, you do that. And you know, I really love that about jazz, and particularly this part kind of jazz.
And at the same time, though, it's like Thelonious's compositions are nuts, right? So like normally like bebop is kind of structured where you have like you have like an opening melody, which is sort of, they call it the head, right? Which is like this line, and then it sort of, it's opened up, and then you can sort of take turns improvising and stuff, and then you close by returning to that head. His opening melodies are fucking nuts. Like, you know, Thelonious Monk is well known for being like quite a like, you know, zany kind of crazy person, and so you listen like Well You Needin'. I mean, try to hum the main line. It's actually like 20 different things.
Yeah,
and so it'll be like and it like does all this stuff, and then there will be parts where like the piano plays something and like the horn then repeats it or whatever, and it's like, it's hard to describe without listening, but it's like the head is so zany and nuts, and then it just like all of a sudden is like empty and freed up. Like it's like the craziest thing way he writes music. So I don't know, you get a lot of his like personality in the way he composes, but yeah, then you get like this like super looseness, and the interplay is great. Without going on and on about it, you know, it was cool to hear Coltrane on this. From what I understand, the relationship here was almost like a mentorship. You know, Coltrane was sort of like this young guy, like learning from Monk, like learning at the school of Monk. And it's wild because just a few months after this, Coltrane would really emerge as the Coltrane we really know. And he would like never stop on this like ceaseless journey of, you know, pushing every kind of musical boundary. But I felt like here he was a little bit, there's like a safeness to this record. Like, you know, Coleman Hawkins is great. Coltrane is great. Monk is like always great. Blakey is like fantastic throughout this record, and he's, you know, playing constantly. So it's like really a treat. But did you guys feel that it just felt like a little bit safe for how you would expect when you hear like the words like Coltrane, Monk, Blakey, you know?
Yeah, I do agree. It is like a little safe. Like I think this is a great kind of album for somebody that's like fresh to the genre, you know, especially like bebop and stuff, because it's not going like ridiculously nuts. You know, there's still like enough structure, I think, to keep you interested in it all. But yeah, it is like a little deceiving when you read that list of you know, just absolute, you know, juggernauts that are going to be on it. And, you know, I mean, somebody like Coltrane who later, you know, did completely flip everything on its head, to, you know, maybe not be doing that as much here. But, you know, it doesn't, you know, you don't always have to be doing that. I think it's good to kind of have a safer type, you know, record every now and then with something like this. I think this is an excellent introduction.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it is a great introduction. I think, you know, listening to other records before this, maybe you have the expectation to hear something that's mind-blowing or whatever. And, you know, there's a couple of those types of moments, but it's not, it feels very easy to get through, you know what I mean? And not requiring, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as, I guess, challenging as other jazz records do. But, you know, it sounds like a great jam, you know, like it just sounds like they're vibing really well. I mean, you know, for anybody who's interested in getting into jazz, I mean, I would totally recommend, an album like this, minus the bonus stuff.
Yeah. So, okay. 9.1 was the score. I guess I agree with that. It doesn't feel like the essential Monk. But like you guys said, I think it would be a nice place to start. And it's like, when I describe it like that, it might like turn some people off, but it's like, it's got about 4 of the greatest musicians that ever lived on it. I don't think it's any of their best work, but they're still like the best ever. So it's a treat to hear them playing together, which, probably besides this record, you never get those 4 together again. So I want to ask if you guys agree with the score, but I also want to ask, one, do you guys hope that Pitchfork does more jazz classics? And 2, do you hope that they kind of like pick these sort of slightly stranger picks? Or, do you wish they would do like the bona fide classics, like Thelonious Monk's Brilliant Corners instead of this one? Do you like that they did kind of an off-kilter thing?
I do like that they did like a little bit of an off-kilter thing. If we were listening to Love Supreme, like obviously that's a 10. Right. Obviously we would just gush over it, and it would, it's great to listen to again. But it's also nice to listen to something like this that like I wasn't overly familiar with. It was nice to hear like something that's still great, but like not Kinda Blue or Love Supreme, that you've heard a billion times and everyone knows. So I do hope that if they continue to do more jazz, and I hope they do, I it's nice to get an excuse to listen to it and talk about it. So if I hope if they do more jazz that they kind of stick to these more strange on the sidelines kind of records. As for the score, I think a 9.1 is a good score. This isn't the best jazz album you're ever going to hear, but I mean, like you said, to get a chance to hear Monk, Coltrane, Hawkins, and Blakey in the same room is worth the price of admission, and you're not going to be disappointed whatsoever. So I agree, 9.1.
Yeah, I agree with the score as well. 9.1 for sure, for all the things that you guys said. I hope that Pitchfork does more jazz classics, and I would welcome the Juggernaut classics, the 10 out of 10s, as well as some of these not so popular picks. I'd probably like to see more of those not so popular picks, but I wouldn't mind. I think it'd be fun to kind of gush over something like a Love Supreme, just not all the time. You know what I mean?
What we should do is, we talked about if Pitchfork ever fucking stops like just pumping out like 4 or 5 BNRs a week, we want to do that introduction to Vaporwave. We should do like a how to get into jazz section.
Hey,
that would be fun.
How to get into jazz after you've listened to Kinda Blue and a Love Supreme. What to do next?
What to do next?
You watch La La Land, now you want to really get into jazz.
You're a jazz expert after watching La La Land. What do you do now? All right, well, God damn it, have we run out of time for a game again?
Yeah, I think so. I wrote this game, the next game is mine, and I wrote it like, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, and
the questions are like a month old.
Yeah, the questions had to do with whatever we were reviewing way back then, so whenever we do get around to this game, it's going to make absolutely no sense. But yeah, I don't think we have time for it. Maybe Pitchfork will slow the hell down this week. But next week, we'll talk about, has there been any BNRs, BNMs yet this week?
Oh yeah, we did get a BNR. We got one BNR by some Japanese composer, some experimental stuff.
Oh yeah, we did. That sounds interesting. So we'll talk about that. I'm seeing Tortoise on Tuesday. I've never seen them before, so I'm excited about that. And I'll tell you about it. I'm going to the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. I'm taking a trip. I already heard your brother Gabe has been there before. He told me they got a whole Velvet Underground section. I'm excited. I bought a book about the Velvet Underground to read on the plane. So, follow us on Instagram. I'll post the pictures of that kind of stuff at Metaphoric Music, and, maybe we'll talk about it on the show as well. So make sure you subscribe. You can do that on iTunes, or you can do it on our website, which is metaphoricmusic.com. Email us, let us know your thoughts, metaphoricmusic@gmail.com. Stay connected on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all of that junk. It is at Metaphoric Music, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
So long.